1. Hello everyone, welcome to Editing the Academy, where we talk about the best nominated films for the particular year and then decide if the Academy made the right choice, which chances are they probably didn't. My name is Darryl, I'm your co-host.
And I'm Laura.
She is also a co-host, in case you're keeping track, because there are two of us. All right, so Laura, what year are we starting with? And we need to make the differentiation, oh my God, I'm fucking up the words already, between the year that the films came out and the year that the Academy actually did them. So what years are we doing here?
We are looking at films that were released between January 1st and December 31st, 1969, that were awarded during the Oscars ceremony in April of 1970.
Beautiful. All right, so back then there were 5 films. Now there are, it depends on what particular year, but there were 5 films back then. The 5 films that we're going to be talking about for the 1969 year are number 1, Anne of a Thousand Days. Number 2, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Number 3, Hello, Dolly. Number 4, Z, and number 5, Midnight Cowboy. Right out of the gate, we'll acknowledge Midnight Cowboy won. Our job is to determine if the Academy made the right choice.
And do you think they did?
I do not.
I do not either.
Nice. All right, we're already off
to the races.
I like this. Okay, so let's do some quick background information on the individual films. I'm going to start with Anne of a Thousand Days. This was directed by Charles Jarrott, written by Bridget Boland and John Hale, starred Genevieve Bujold, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Richard Burton, Irene Pappas, Anthony Quayle. It was nominated for Best Picture, Best Actor in a Leading Role, Best Actress in a Leading Role, Best Actress in a Supporting Role, Best Writing, Art Direction, Cinematography, Costume Design, Music, and Sound, and it won for Costume Design.
Okay, so it was the first time that Genevieve Bujold was in an English-speaking movie.
Oh,
she is a native French speaker.
Okay, I was going to guess French. Sure.
Yep. It was based on a Broadway play in which Rex Harrison played the king, and he won a Tony Award for that.
Good for him.
Irene Pappas is in both this movie and in Z.
Ah, yes, I saw that.
We'll talk about a little bit later. And Richard Burton was not a fan of Genevieve Bujold.
Oh, they did not get along?
They did not get along. Or he did not get along with her. He thought Elizabeth Taylor should have had the role.
Oh, all right, fair enough.
So there you go.
So the second film, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, was directed by George Roy Hill, also known for Slapshot, Slaughterhouse-Five, The World According to Garp, which is a fantastic film. It was written by William Goldman, probably best known for writing The Princess Bride.
Yeah.
Another fantastic film. It starred Robert Redford, Paul Newman, and Katharine Ross, a bunch of other people, but those are the principals. It was nominated for Best Picture, Director, Story/Screenplay, Cinematography, Score, not a musical, Song, Sound, and it won for Story, Screenplay, Cinematography, and Score. Fascinating facts about this lovely film?
I have some fun facts. So actually, most people know that Steve McQueen was the first choice for the Sundance Kid.
Yep.
But he did not get it because he wouldn't share equal billing with Paul Newman. And other people who were considered the second choice was Jack Lemmon.
Oh.
And after
that would have been
so interesting. And after that, Warren Beatty and Marlon Brando were also considered.
I knew Warren Beatty, I did not know the others.
Yep.
I also had heard that Paul Newman was the person who really pushed for him to get this role.
For Robert Redford to get it. Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And then the other quick fun fact, since we're talking about Hello, Dolly, is the shots of them in the pictures were taken on the Hello, Dolly New York set.
Really?
They wouldn't let them film on the set, which was what they wanted, but they let them take still photographs, and so that's what the photographs were on the Hello, Dolly New York set.
All right, speaking of Hello, Dolly, the song Hello, Dolly, a little fascinating fact because I'm totally infringing on your territory. It was a #1 hit for Louis Armstrong, who wrote it. It stars Barbra Streisand and Walter Matthau. This was an odd choice, I thought, for Walter Matthau in this, but we'll get to that. It was directed by Gene Kelly, which I was surprised to learn. Based on the musical, which was based on the Thornton Wilder play, The Matchmaker. Written/adapted by Ernest Lehman. Stars Barbra Streisand, Walter Matthau, Michael Crawford, Danny Laughlin, Tommy Tune, Fritz Feld, Marianne McAndrew, and E.J. Peeker. It was nominated for Best Picture, Best Art Direction, Best Cinematography, Best Costume Design, Best Editing, Best Score, Best Sound, and it won Art Direction, Score, and Sound. Fascinating facts, my dear.
So Walter Matthau was wildly miscast in this. I think everybody agrees.
Yes.
But partially it's because Barbara Streisand was so miscast. The role was supposed to be played by somebody in their 40s to 60s. So all community theaters that play Hello Dolly, she's supposed to be she was with her husband for a long time and he's been dead a long time. So she was 27 playing a 40 to 60 year old. So they were both a little bit miscast. Tommy Tune is 6 feet 6.5 inches because I had to look it up because he was a tall dude. And Michael Crawford, best known for originating the Phantom of the Opera on Broadway, as we were talking about earlier today.
Really?
So Cornelius is the first Phantom of the Opera on Broadway.
I did not know that. Nice. I like this little segment. We're going to keep this segment alive. Next up is Z, which I thought was a Greek film. You pointed out that it was done in French. Directed by Costa Gavras, written by him and Jorge Semprún. I'm totally butchering these names and I apologize. Starring Jean-Louis Trinant, Yves Montand, Irene Papas again, Jacques Perrin. It was nominated for Best Picture, Director, Adapted Screenplay, Best Foreign Language Film, Editing, and it won for Foreign Language and Editing.
Fascinating facts.
Yes.
This was actually based in large part, on a Greek assassination that occurred in 1963. So when they say it's mostly based on truth, it is mostly based on truth.
Okay.
It is also the inspiration for Steven Soderbergh's Traffic, which you can really see when you think about it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Now that you mentioned that, I was like, all right, that's actually making a lot of sense.
And the reason that it's titled Z is apparently in the Greek language, Z is for graffiti for he lives. So.
Okay. Because there's that scene where they painted on the ground and then there's the posters, and I was wondering, because like the guy's name there's not a Z in his name.
No, and very few of the people seem to have names too.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, and the last film, the one that won, is Midnight Cowboy. Directed by John Schlesinger, adapted by Waldo Salt, starring Dustin Hoffman, John Voight, supporting roles played by Sylvia Miles, John MacGyver, Brenda Vaccaro, Bob Balaban, Jennifer Salt, and Barnard Hughes. It was nominated for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor. Hoffman and Voight were both nominated. Best Supporting Actress, Best Screenplay, Best Editing, and it won Best Picture, Director, and Screenplay. So, there are the 5 films.
We need fun facts on Midnight Cowboy.
We do.
Okay.
Sorry, I totally neglected that. Absolutely. Fun fact, Midnight Cowboy.
Okay. So most people know that it was rated X and it's the only X-rated movie that's ever won Best Picture.
It is subsequently, I noticed, because as I was watching it, downgraded to an R.
They did not cut anything from the movie. The MPAA actually changed their standards. So that's how it got to be an R-rated film. There's not a lot of fun facts that people don't know about Midnight Cowboy because it's a pretty well-known film. But the only things that I could find was that Everybody's Talking was not eligible for Best Song because it was released a couple of years ago. Because that's a pretty common song and it was not nominated, and I want to know why. And Brenda Vaccaro later played Joey Tribbiani's mother on Friends.
Okay.
So there you go. That's from my own personal knowledge. I didn't have to look that up.
The only fascinating fact I know about this one is the "Hey, I'm walking here." That was a completely improv scene.
That's
not scripted.
Well, that's what Dustin Hoffman says. The director says it was not.
Really?
Yes.
I did not know that.
So yeah, so I agree. That's what I've always heard as well.
Okay. All right. So there are 5 films. We've both said thus far that we do not believe the Academy made the correct choice in choosing Midnight Cowboy for their Best Picture for 1969. So let's kind of dive through the pictures. We'll talk about them. We'll have a totally different video where we talk about the criteria that we use for how we're kind of looking at all of these, but ultimately it's going to really be just kind of about the way the movie makes us feel and the things that we like about an individual movie. We should also probably acknowledge right out of the gate that this is 2024. We are reviewing movies that came out in 1969. So there is going to be probably ongoing conversations throughout this podcast of how that kind of plays into what our look and feel and how we feel about an individual movie will be.
Great point.
Is there a particular one you want to start with?
Do you want to just go alphabetical? Start with Anne of a Thousand Days?
Sure.
Okay.
All right, first impressions of Anne of a Thousand Days. Did you like it? Was it an enjoyable experience? Was it worth your time?
Yes, it
Okay.
was.
Did you know much of the history? Because this is a very specific time period in history that they're going through. Did you know any of this at all? Were you kind of just picking it up as you went along? Did you know any of the history?
I knew all about the history. I didn't
Okay.
know the movie itself. I knew all about the history. I had actually just recently rewatched The Tudors from Showtime, so I'm in it. I knew most of the history, yeah. How about you?
This is one of the, there are a couple periods in history that I really do gravitate towards. This is one of them. And this was a very big pivotal aspect of English history in particular, because this is the establishment of the Church of England. Why did the Church of England start? Henry VIII is well known for having many wives, killing many of them as well. And I found this one kind of interesting because from everything that I've read with Henry VIII, he was just basically a big old horny dude. And his original marriage was not producing children. He needed not producing a son.
Male children,
Correct.
yes.
And he needed a male heir for the lineage to be able to continue. And basically, he was trying to find a way to get rid of his current wife, which, according to the Catholic Church, is not going to happen. First one for the annulment, that wasn't working. They were not on board with that. And basically, he just said, well, screw it. I'm going to create my own religion, which they definitely touch on, but they don't go into hugely in this, like how that came to be. They do have the scenes with all the cardinals, half of which are on board, half were not. But I did enjoy that they weaved that through. But watching it, I don't know if it was a conscious choice that they did, but it just came across as a dude who just wanted to have sex with somebody besides his wife.
Yes, but I do think the male heir was a big part of it. So he wanted to have sex with his wife and have it result in a male heir.
Yes.
But yes, I think that's pretty much all. It didn't talk much about the religion.
Nope.
It didn't talk much about that history. And I thought it was interesting that Anne was portrayed as kind of more of had an active role in her history.
Yeah.
Which I haven't heard in some of the other histories that I've read about.
I was a little surprised by that as well, because again, this is 1969,
Yeah.
and the way that they portrayed her, like, very, very clearly early on, she rejected the idea of just being essentially a mistress, because her sister had been a mistress, produced a child. She's like, that is not going to be me. In order for this to happen, you have to marry me, which sends down now the entire path of creating the Church of England, getting the annulment, all of that. And I was very surprised that the film gave her that much agency for the time period.
Yeah, nope, I totally agree. The movie itself, I thought the performances were really good.
Yep.
I thought the costumes were good, but I didn't think it was that propulsive. I thought it was a PBS miniseries kind of thing.
Yeah.
It was enjoyable. I enjoyed watching it, but it's not something I would have nominated for Best Picture. I think it's the Richard Burton of it all that kind of put it over the top, in that time frame especially.
I agree, and you're right, it did have that kind of PBS feel to it, and part of it was like the film stock and quality that they use is something PBS adapted later on. I did like it was a bigger scope than what I thought the movie was going to be. A lot of times when they're adapting plays, particularly like English plays, it has a feel of a play. Like there's no fourth wall broken. You can see things. The settings are very limited. This did have a bigger feel and what I think was probably a bigger budget for what it should have been, or what it could have been initially. It just felt bigger than I think you're used to at that time for seeing this kind of production.
I agree. A lot of outside sets, a lot of, clearly I'm assuming some of it was filmed in England with the castles and whatnot, and it won Best Costumes for this one, so agree. So I totally agree with that. And I did like the end of it being focused on Elizabeth, because again, the male heir was so important through the entire movie, and at the end of the day, Elizabeth is the one that really kind of put England into its next path. Can I talk about one nitpick that I have noted?
Of course.
Which is I don't know if it's editing, I'm not sure what it was, but you would show Richard Burton doing his like manly dance, and he was doing he was kind of very, I don't even know how to explain it, but he was standing at the front of the dance, and he was being very sturdy, and then it would edit to his back, which was clearly no longer Richard Burton, who was doing a sprightly little jig and dancing around and doing all of those whatever century kind of dances. So that made me a little insane. They kept flipping back and forth to clearly Richard Burton, not at all Richard Burton. So just have to throw that out there.
One of the things that I really did like about the film, and I think it probably was provocative for the time, is it didn't shy away at all from the choices that the family was making and trying to force Anne into. The family was essentially trying to court favor with the king, saying, take my daughter as your whore, concubine, mistress, whatever.
Absolutely.
And the dad was 100% on board with this. You see that scene where she's going along with it because she realizes she doesn't have a choice, but she breaks down and starts to cry because she realizes the atrocity that they're basically putting upon their daughter. And I like that
for the second time, because they've already done it for the first daughter.
Correct.
That the father chastises her for sleeping with him too soon and giving him what he wanted, and then he got bored with her.
So I like that they didn't shy away from that at all, and that they fully embraced that this was what was being happened. I would have assumed for this time period that they would have downplayed that aspect of it, and they did. They put it not necessarily front and center, but they didn't shy away from discussing it, showing it, and
it was very obvious.
Yeah, I like that. Overall, I did enjoy the film. I do not believe it should have won Best Picture.
Agreed.
The performances were fine, but to me they were very of their time.
Mm-hmm.
They were not super nuanced. They were not. The female lead was amazing. I thought she was by far the best actress in the entire thing. Out of everybody, male, female, she was by far the best actress.
Playing Anne. Yeah. I agree completely. Yes. I thought she was amazing. And to know that that's the first time she played in an English role, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else about Anne, or do you want to move on?
I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to save Butch Cassidy because we're probably going to talk a lot about that one. Let's jump into Hello, Dolly. I know this is a personal favorite for you, and this is where we're going to fight.
Okay.
I did not like this movie for many reasons, and I will explain them, but it has nothing to do with the fact that it was a musical.
You love musicals, yep.
I do enjoy musicals, but as we talked about earlier, musicals for me have to be just so good. Mm-hmm. They have to be better than probably an average movie should be for me to really enjoy it as a musical. This one did not do that. First off, Walter Matthau took me completely out of the entire thing.
Totally miscast. Agreed.
Second, a lot of the dancing and singing that was happening felt very much like retro. It felt 40s, 50s kind of movie making for musicals. Everything was framed. The productions were big, and they seemed to go on almost too long, many of them. Like, you could have cut 45 seconds, a minute and a half out of a lot of those numbers and still been able to have the movie go on. The standout performance, and I think the only reason this was nominated, was because of Barbara.
Totally.
She is amazing. This is the start of her playing that fast-talking kind of character that she ended up playing for many of the movies that she was in, and she was great. She was phenomenal. But she's also downplayed in a lot of it. Like, the movie is not about her. Even though it kind of is, there are large sections where like a good 20 minutes go by and she's not on screen. So I was a bit surprised by that. But ultimately, I was just kind of bored with it. I really was. I was just kind of bored.
Okay, point, counterpoint.
Okay.
I don't fully disagree with you, because this is the first time I've seen it all the way through in a long time, and the comments I wrote down was it was very uneven. So there are parts that I watch and they are light and happy and they bring me joy. And there were other parts, and my notes say they could have been cut out entirely or shortened significantly. So I think I agree with you on, I've watched this and seen the parts that make me happy, and then I fast forward through the parts that don't, which are probably the parts that bothered you.
The secondary characters, like the two men who go on their excursion into New York City, most of that was just boring and unnecessary. I mean, I kind of get why they were there. They were to do counterpoints to the other things that were happening, but they just really didn't add anything in my estimation.
The struggle I had with it watching it this time is they're stage actors, and the
Yeah.
whole thing,
Yeah.
like Gene Kelly set this up as he filmed a musical.
Yep.
He didn't create a movie musical.
Correct.
So he was, so like everything was too big, and the faces were too big, and the gestures were too big, and the dance sections were too long. Again, Gene Kelly directing it. The two that were much too long was the Hello Dolly scene,
Yeah.
was a good 20 minutes too long. And then the scene where, and I forget which one it was, when Barnaby and Millie were dancing, was lovely, and they're beautiful dancers, and that's probably what Gene Kelly was responding to, needed to be cut by half.
Yeah.
So I fully agree with that. I thought it could be an hour shorter. I thought the pacing was terrible, and there were two scenes. The Irene scene where she was singing her story, unnecessary, and Barbara singing by herself in the room, fully unnecessary.
So you've seen this multiple times.
Yes.
Do you remember the first time that you saw it?
I don't. I just remember having loved it and the music so much.
Because one of the things that I didn't like about it, and movies can overcome this, I don't think this one did, is the predictability of it. I knew the minute she met Walter Matthau what was going to happen.
Oh, of course.
She's a matchmaker. She's going to get him. They are going to end up together. And when movies are that transparent in the beginning, then you just need to do something to make that earned. And I don't think they did. They just followed that pattern all the way through. That's why I asked if you...
Yeah, that piece I don't know that I agree with you, because I think that movie musicals are very predictable. It is, you know, at the train station in the first 5 minutes, she goes, oh, who put a silly idea like that into my head? I mean, your head. You knew where she was going. So I don't think the predictability was hard. I think that's just a characteristic of these musical movies or musical shows. I liked the fact that they had so many different things going on, and they wrapped it all up quite well in one scene kind of at the end.
Okay.
To me, that's just musical comedy.
And musicals are far more predictable than just a movie you're going to stumble into, like a drama or a comedy. Comedies have a little bit more rules than drama, but so I'll agree with you. I just don't think that they earned this, that the movie earned the predictability of what they put out. I think it just followed all of the steps that they were supposed to follow, and there was nothing new, inventive, or, in my estimation, really that exciting to get me to that end that you knew was going to happen in the beginning.
I thought it was beautifully done in some of those outside scenes. That was the one piece where it was outside of what you would see in a theater. Most of it could have been filmed in a theater.
Yeah.
You got to see it outside. I love the costumes. I agree with you. Barbara Streisand was the best part of it. She just earned and owned that role, but it was not the right role for her. That's the thing. If it was a role that was supposed to be played by somebody so much older than her, it's too bad she was almost set up for failure.
I don't know this, maybe you do. Was this her first film role?
No, it was Funny Girl. I thought she won the Oscar for the year prior.
Okay, all right, that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Moving on, let's do Z.
All right. Sounds good.
Your initial thoughts on Z. Neither of us knew this movie going into this one.
I had not heard of it. I had never seen it before. Did not know it wasn't in English. So I, again, enjoyed it. I'm glad that I saw it, but I thought it was quite dated.
Yeah, I 100% agree, unfortunately. I'm a sucker for a good political drama.
Totally, yeah.
And I think it's because I've seen so many of them through the years that the expectations that I have for a political drama are far higher.
Agree.
And I'm not saying that this at the time didn't satisfy everything that it was supposed to and do everything that it was supposed to. I just think now in retrospect my expectations were so much higher for a political drama. I don't think it kind of capitalized on that. I think it wasted time with characters we didn't need to spend with.
Yes.
I think the build that a good political drama has, this did not have. I think they spent too much time in just kind of putting everything in a straightforward little line. This is how things go. This is where the information is coming from. I don't think they built any sort of real suspense or tension, which a good political drama should have. I think it was just a straightforward film and story, and in that aspect, I think it failed.
I completely agree. I thought the beginning of the first scene was really interesting. I was excited to get into it because the way that they were comparing like how to get rid of mildew with how to get rid of communists, I thought was fascinating and interesting and kind of funny. And then they didn't play back on that humor at all through the rest of the film. And then for the next 40 minutes, honestly, I spent time trying to figure out who is everybody, because nobody had names. They all had roles.
Yes.
The magistrate and the chief of police, and except for the general, who was obviously in military garb, everybody was dressed in an earth-toned suit and looked exactly the same in a 1969 way. So I didn't care for kind of where it was going. There was one scene that I thought was interesting and had some tension, which is the scene in the blue pickup truck. When, there was a scene of action where somebody was getting clubbed and they were driving around, he was trying to shake him out of the truck. That was it. Everything else was fine. It wasn't good, it wasn't bad, it was just kind of fine.
Yeah, it was all just, at the end of the day, it was all just kind of mediocre. I mean, the focus and the ends that you get as the story is developing. Like, the first third of it, you get the hint of this photographer who's kind of like in the background and occasionally stepping in.
Yes.
And then suddenly the photographer, like, the next third becomes the focus of the film.
Yes.
And then he's backed off. Like, I didn't understand, I guess, the narrative structure of the story that they were telling and the way that they were actually telling it, because it kept focusing on all of these different things. And also, the general character who was ultimately responsible for the entire thing almost was like a farcical representation of himself. Like, the umbrage that he would take that someone would even deem to question him, just, it seemed more comical than realistic. And kind of going to your point, I don't know if they were trying to be funny in those moments or if it just came across that way.
Yeah, other than that first scene, there was not a lot of humor in it, and so I don't think it was purposeful humor that you're seeing. But yes, exactly. The guy reminded me of Mr. Whipple from the commercial. Did he remind you of that, or is that just me? Yeah. And the only other, I'm going to do another nitpick too, is the club. Did you see? So they had a club where they kept thunking people over the head, and it bounced every time they were around. It's like somebody in editing has to at least have something looking realistic. So yeah, it didn't do it for me. But again, I'm glad I watched it. It was something that was interesting and so of its time.
Yes, and we can't kind of, I guess, underscore that something of its time is perfectly fine and perfectly acceptable, and I'm sure that it was, I don't want to call it groundbreaking, but was enjoyable and for audiences of that particular time. That film, if that film were to be released today, it would not hold up in any way, shape, or form.
No, it wouldn't. But going back to our comment about traffic, is I can see the footprint of traffic in this movie, but it does it so much better.
And part of that, again, and this is something, one of the criteria is the editing, the pacing of how the movie is actually being presented overall. And the pacing of this, the editing choices that they made, where they choose to linger and spend moments on people that they're having conversations, and then where they choose to do their quick cuts. Ultimately, I just thought that they were the wrong choices.
Agreed. Especially when the wife is like thinking back to the operating room, and that just made no sense to me.
And honestly, and this is going to sound incredibly horrible, and I don't mean it that way, but really what was the purpose of the female characters in this film? They really did not stand out. They didn't have any sort of agency to be doing anything. They were just there to look sad or to like take a moment to progress this one small little plot line. They really didn't have any sort of investiture in them in any way, shape, or form. And honestly, you could have removed them and it would have been fine. And I don't like that.
I think they were there to humanize the men. They weren't there of their own agency. They were there to show, oh, look, this man is leaving behind this wife. So therefore he ultimately has more value for some reason.
Okay, let's move on from that. And what's the only...
Midnight Cowboy, and then I think I know where we might possibly be heading.
Oh, wait, let's do Butch first.
Okay.
So, Butch, Cassidy, and the Sundance Kid, both of us have admitted this is a favorite movie of ours. We watched it multiple times. However, going back and watching it through the critical lens of being able to then talk about it, did it deserve the best picture, etc., what were your thoughts of the rewatch this time?
So I was trying to be critical when I was watching it. I really was. It is one of my favorite movies. It's very enjoyable, very entertaining. I was looking at it from all of these different criteria. So performances, first of all, I cannot see anybody else in these roles. I think they both have charm and charisma, and I think that they have the right amount of just, they're dramatic, they're funny, they work well off each other. So I'm going to bounce it off of Midnight Cowboy in a moment, because you're looking at kind of two buddy movies in some way, two westerns almost in some way, and this duo, I really thought that they were impressive. I thought the cinematography was beautiful. I thought that it was I'm a William Goldman fan anyway, but I think that the dialogue, the writing, the non-dialogue scenes.
So where they just sit for a moment.
Yeah, exactly. And just even the two scenes at the beginning where you introduce who Butch is and then you introduce who Sundance is, they're fantastic. Like there's the bank scene and then the poker scene. You know who those men are immediately with very little dialogue.
And this is something that we're going to talk about over and over again, I'm sure. But there is absolutely a thing that you can see on screen where people just have chemistry. They just work together and play off each other incredibly well. You see it often in romance movies, and that's fine. But in this, it is essentially a romance movie just between two guys. It's like the Shawshank of its time. And the chemistry between the two of them is just amazing. They play off each other so well. They just seem to know and inhabit their characters, and they seem and give you that very distinct, very early on, that these people are absolutely friends and have been for a while. And they enjoy each other's company, they're comfortable with each other, everything just seems to work together because of that chemistry that they have. My problem is with Catherine.
Okay.
My problem with Catherine is not how her character is written, although she's kind of written in a shallow way. My problem is how much of a dick Sundance is to her through this entire process. Like, I did not remember that until I watched it this time, and I was like, he is horrible to her.
In which scenes? Because it's interesting, because like the only time I see him truly horrible to her is when Butch says, I'm going to take your woman, and he says you can have her. Like, that to me was uncomfortable. The rest of it I thought was, just they've been together so long, they're comfortable with each other. I didn't see it as, many watches through it, I didn't see it as problematic.
Okay, I did. And maybe it's because I was hoping for, I didn't catch the history. I every time that I've watched it, this was not their first time together, obviously, but I did not catch that this has been something that had been going on for a long period of time. I thought that this was a relatively new thing, maybe less than a year, and his indifference to her even being around. There's the scene where they're down in Bolivia and she's thinking about moving back.
Right.
And she says that, and she clearly wants him to say, well, no, I want you to stay, but he doesn't, and instead he asks, this is what she's going to do, how do you feel about this? And he's like, well, if that's what she wants. And that scene to me, and I might be misinterpreting it, but that scene to me just seemed like such indifference to this person who clearly cares about you.
I read that scene fully differently.
Okay.
So at the beginning, when she says, I'll go down to Bolivia and I'll stitch your wounds and I'll do this and I will do everything, but I will not watch you die.
Yep.
To me, that scene read as, it's time for me to go now because you're going to die.
Okay.
And so that's where I read it, was Sundance kind of saying to Butch at the same time, it's like, she's leaving because it's almost over. Are you aware of that? Are you okay with it? And them all acknowledging that this is their end. So that's the way I read it.
Okay. Now.
So he's letting her go so that she does not have to see them die.
All right. Putting that spin on it, it makes it more tolerable, sure, and actually gives it a slightly deeper.
It's almost a romantic.
Yeah. It gives it a deeper level. I'm going to go with what your interpretation is, because I like that better for the film and for the story, as opposed to my version where he's just a dick. Because you like this guy, you don't want him to be a dick.
You don't, and like the first scene when they are together, the first time I saw this movie, I'm like, oh my God, this is a bad guy. This is a very, very bad dude who's about to rape this lady. And then later on, you're like, oh, they're both cool with this, so I need to be cool with this. Was Butch in love with her, in your mind? I think they were both in love with her, and she was in love with Sundance.
I think his question when they're riding around on the bike, which is kind of a scene that does take you out of the movie a little bit, but I'm fine with it. When she asks him that question and he responds, I think that's a genuine and honest response. And I think that it would have switched if circumstances had been different. I don't think she would have left one for the other, but if she had met the other first and developed, then I think that would have been perfectly fine.
Agreed.
Um,
It's almost like the two of them together are her perfect romantic partner.
yeah, because she can turn to him,
Yeah.
she can talk to
The
him.
warmth,
Yeah.
from Butch.
And she just doesn't get that from him.
Yeah.
Things that I liked about this movie a lot, and this is, we'll acknowledge, this is kind of the start of that 70s film auteur where the director becomes God on set and
Yep.
they're responsible for the entire movie, which was not necessarily the way it was a lot. We're going to talk about this a lot for Midnight Cowboy. But the way that this movie is structured and the way that you get through scenes and the moments where you pause and you just have the two characters talking, but even like the stills that help progress the story along, that start out in the beginning or also in the mid when they go to Bolivia, and then ultimately the freeze frame at the end, which is a callback to both of those. That framing I don't think had necessarily been seen before as a way to progress a story, because stories progress by you show people talking or you
Right.
show action. So to have those quick kind of things was a unique way to do this, and thoroughly enjoyable and completely works.
Yes.
How do you get these two characters from where they are down to, through New York, down to Bolivia? Well, we can just throw them on a train, having a quick conversation, and suddenly they arrive. That doesn't work. How can we do that better? Oh, we'll do with this quick montage with all of these scenes and all of these stills, and you get a slightly deeper level to them, because they're having fun. You're seeing them enjoying themselves before they go down to Bolivia. Like, I just like the way that they were able to use these film techniques, which people now use on a regular, but probably one of the first times that this kind of thing had been done. Just like the way the film was put together and the thought, I thought, is much deeper than any of the films that we've talked about thus far.
And the way they're being chased as well. Like
Yeah.
where you could see the posse coming after them so far away but so close and gaining speed, and just, I thought that was really well done as well. Every time they kind of stopped slightly, if you just looked over the hill, the posse was coming through. That took some real impressive filmmaking.
Yeah, I mean, at its core, this is a Western. Well, actually, no, not at its core, it's not a Western. It's just the framing of the movie happens to be a Western.
Right.
And so they relied on a lot of those tropes. It's funny. There are moments where you laugh out loud. There are very tender moments. There are very emotional moments. It does take you on kind of a bit of a roller coaster throughout the entire film, and it does all of these things very well. The scenes where they're robbing that same train over and over again are quite funny. The scenes where they are going through and being chased, they are emotional things. Like there's a confession that happens, and as genuinely would happen, one friend turns to the other and just thinks it's ludicrous that someone can't swim. So all of this does really work for me in the telling of this particular story, which is a fairly linear story. We start here, we end here. It's just a straightforward narrative. There's no there's no backstory. There's no.
You don't need it.
No, everything is just, this is the story we're telling. We're starting here and we're going to end here, and how can we tell that story the best way we can? I think they pulled it off, man.
I totally agree. And can we take 1 minute for because you're talking about the, blowing up the train a couple of times, the Cloris Leachman of it all. I mean, like, all of the background characters were fantastic. I mean, you've got Ted, what's his name, at the beginning in the Hole in the Wall gang, the Lurch from the Addams Family, and then you've got Cloris Leachman, you've got Woodcock in the, in the train, and just like every performer that's in this movie was fantastic.
Yeah.
Except for maybe Catherine Ross, because I don't know that she was given a ton to work with.
No, she wasn't. Her character is kind of a limited character. She's not one-dimensional, but I wouldn't say she's necessarily three-dimensional.
Exactly. I agree with that.
All right. Okay, so our final one, the award winner for the year, Midnight Cowboy. I'm going to let you start on this one because I have a feeling we both have a lot to say.
We probably do. Okay, so in looking at this movie, like Butch, I was trying to, not looking at it as pure love in my heart. This one, I was looking at it and trying to see it through the 1969 lens instead of the 2024 lens. So
I will say this. I wanted really much to like this movie.
yes.
I went in being like, I want to like this movie.
Same here. I really did. I am glad I watched it. I would not say I liked it. And in fact, the word that kept coming to mind was bleak. It was just so bleak.
I thought it was fucking pretentious.
It really was. Well, all of the editing and the changing of, the scene where they were at the party, the scene where you're trying to see what happened to him and his old girlfriend, with him and his grandmother. They were just doing too much and not telling us enough. And I didn't care for the filmmaking style, first of all.
Yeah, I think all right, I want to say this. I think that because of this movie, and because of this movie winning, a lot of directors moving forward were able to take chances that they would not have been able to take if this movie had not won.
Okay.
So for that, I am very thankful that the movie won.
Okay.
I think that the chances that this movie took, you have to remember, this is coming out of the Summer of Love, 1969. The culture in America was more open to things than they probably had been 2, even 3 years before.
Yes.
So I personally think, and I'm totally projecting, but I think that the Academy was like, this is the way we want film to go, so we're going to recognize and award this because this is what we want movies to be. Because the movie took a lot of chances. It took a lot of chances.
The themes in the movie you did not see in movies in the past. The homosexuality, the things that were happening, the open sex, the fact that he was a hustler, he was a male prostitute. You did not see those before. So they took a lot of chances. All of the chances that Dustin Hoffman was taking in the role, which I'm not particularly happy with many of those, to be fair. So here's a question for you. I compared greatly Butch and Sundance and Ratso and Joe. So as far as buddies,
I did not.
Okay, so I was looking at it as like, these are two stories about two male friendships. And
which they are, sure.
Loved Butch and Sundance. In this male friendship, first of all, I thought Jon Voight's role could have been played by any pretty dumb, vacant actor at the time. There was nothing special about him.
No, unfortunately, I don't think Jon Voight did a very good job.
I
don't
agree.
think he did a bad job. I just don't think he particularly stood out or did an Oscar-nominated kind of role. I think he was fine, but for a movie like this, you need more than fine. Particularly for his character to be going through all of the things that he's supposed to be going through.
You don't see it.
No, you don't. They took way too much time in the opening scenes to establish who he was and the life that he came from. They took way too much time in the transition from that to New York. Once he meets up with Rizzo, everything kind of starts to move forward, but not necessarily in a progressive way. Like, there's no real growth or development at all. It's just, this is the way things are, which that can be fine when handled correctly. Like, you don't necessarily always need growth and development. Sometimes things are just the way they are.
Exactly.
And that's fine. But this one, I think it just tried to take on far too much and not spend enough time with any of it.
I fully agree with all of that. And it's interesting that both he and Dustin Hoffman were nominated, and the pair from Butch Cassidy were not nominated. So I find that a travesty. But I want to get to Dustin Hoffman really quickly as well.
Okay, first off, let me say this.
Go for it.
I think Dustin Hoffman was awesome in his role. I really think this was an early part in his career. I've always loved Dustin Hoffman as an actor, and I think he embraced what he was supposed to do and the direction that he was given. I think he embraced the character. I think he did a phenomenal job with what he was given. I just don't think he was given a lot. But I loved him as an actor doing this role. The unfortunate thing was every once in a while you could kind of see through that curtain and say, oh, he's acting now.
We are in violent agreement on this. Because Jon Voight could have been played by anybody.
Sure.
Ratso Rizzo could have only been played by Dustin Hoffman.
Yep.
In this way, I can't see anybody else in that role. Somebody could have played the role differently, but no one could have played it this way, and I fully agree. I like what he did, but also it was a lot. Like, he was capital A acting in a couple of those scenes. So I think we're saying the same thing. The kind of side performers, the woman that Joe ends up with, his first woman that he has sex with, she was nominated for Best Supporting Actress. She was in one scene for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And I just don't understand that at all. They wanted to reward and award this movie, I think.
I agree. And that's what I'm saying is I think because of the culture at the time, they wanted this movie to be a showcase for what they wanted movies to be in the future, which is, I think, ultimately why it ended up winning. I don't know, I just have so many problems with it. It did not tackle any of the things that it was trying to tackle sufficiently. It touched on a lot of things, but did not develop many of them in any way. The overall story was kind of a meandering story. You didn't really even know for a lot of the movie what the story really was. Like, he's trying to just adapt to the new environment while still being himself? Is he trying to grow? Is he just trying to have sex with women for money? Like, you don't really know what Jon Voight's character is doing or accomplishing. Rizzo's character is kind of a sounding board for his journey through this. He's like his guide, his navigator, but he doesn't even really do that great of a job doing that. Like, there's so much that could have been developed that simply was not. There was so much left on the floor.
Exactly, and there's no chemistry between the two of them
at
all. No chemistry at all. I don't really know why they're together, except for the fact that, Ratso needs Joe. Joe doesn't really need Ratso, except for he's lonely.
Yeah.
And you're right, it touches on themes of, is Joe a homosexual? I don't know. And given the lens of 1969, maybe we can't know because they can't portray it. That's fine. And I'm fine with movies that don't spoon feed me. I don't have to be told everything, but it didn't tell me anything.
I just wanted something to latch onto to help me move through the movie. Anything to latch onto, and there was nothing really to latch onto. Some of the best movies, I think, give you somebody to care about or multiple people to care about as you progress through whatever that story is, so that when things happen, you care, you're invested. And this one, I just wasn't invested in anything. I wasn't invested in the story, I wasn't invested in the characters. The actual filming of a lot of the scenes and the way that they were filmed and directed took me out of the movie rather than bring me in. I don't know, I think it was just crap. I really do.
I wouldn't go so far in that I did I'm glad that I saw it because of what it led to. Like you're saying, it's you have to see something to understand the history of film. It's like, okay, here's where we were, here's where we got to better places from here. But I didn't enjoy it. I thought it was bleak. I don't care about any of the characters, and I don't care what happens to Joe when he gets off the bus. Like, stay in Florida, don't stay in Florida. Did he kill the guy he was with? Did he kill Bernard Hughes, or did he not?
I don't know the answer to that question.
I don't either, and I don't care. but I would like to know is how far did he go out of the, affable cowboy that he was at the beginning? How far did he get out of that frame? And I don't know. Yeah,
and that's, again, just going back to what I'm saying, like, I wasn't invested enough to really care one way or the other. Like, I didn't... Did he grow? Did he not grow? I don't know, and ultimately I don't care. And sadly, I didn't care when Rizzo died. I didn't.
No, not at all.
They telegraphed that so much.
You talk about Hello Dolly. You knew this was coming.
Okay, now finally he has died. Okay, so now what? Oh, now he just gets off a bus. Okay, another Dustin Hoffman film that ended with ambiguity at the end, The Graduate.
Much better. On a bus, as a matter of fact.
Yes, and that one at the end, because you are so invested in these two characters and the major decision that they made, and when you're left with that ambiguity at the end, you're almost, it's not that you're let down, you're like,
oh! What's next? It's critical for you to know. On this, I didn't care.
Nope, not at all. All right, my battery's dying here.
So, Darryl Quinlan, what do you think should have won Best Picture for 1969?
I have a feeling we're in agreement in this one, and it's Butch. I think
Butch Cassidy,
yeah. I think Butch should have won. And it's not because I've seen it so many times and I enjoy the film already. Like, going through the things that we've talked about, that one was just, it advanced film, number one. Every category that you take, the editing, the costuming, the writing, the directing, everything about this movie was at the top of its game.
If it was not the number one movie of this category in each of these five in each of those categories, it was a close second. I mean, it was so well rounded.
Yeah.
Yeah, fully agree.
Okay, so we agree that Midnight Cowboy should not have won. The Academy made a mistake.
They
in
did.
our opinion. We believe that Butch Cassidy, and I'm thankful that we both agree, should have won. Give me your order. What will be the order of these 5 films in
Okay.
your estimation?
In my estimation, it was Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Yep.
And then it was, I didn't write it down, so I'm just looking through Anne of 1,000 Days.
Okay.
And then Z.
Okay.
And then, and then Hello Dolly. And then Z. And then Midnight Cowboy.
Okay. The only correction I would make to your list is to reverse Hello Dolly and Z. I would put Z up and then Hello Dolly down just because I had issues with that movie.
And Midnight Cowboy the last.
Yes.
Which is very interesting that we put it as last and the Academy put it first.
Again, a lens from 2024, it's very hard to put ourselves obviously in that particular thing. But like we've talked about, there are movies that were done many, many years ago that
Yeah.
completely still hold up. One of my personal favorites, His Girl Friday.
Phenomenal.
Vastly different time, but still can hold up to this day and as an amazing film. Films do need to be able to do that. So many of them just end up being of their time, and that's fine. You know, the studio can make their money, the actors can get paid, everybody can go and have an enjoyable experience at the theater. That's totally fine. But a movie does, I believe, and should be something that's longer lasting, not just an of the moment type of
I
thing.
fully agree. It's something that is, it's rewatchable. It's something that, for instance, I will say like Schindler's List is a difficult movie.
Yeah.
Very difficult movie, but it's an incredibly well-made movie, and it is rewatchable even though it's painful. And some of these other, like I'm looking at Midnight Cowboy, that is not rewatchable. That is not something that would be enjoyable to see again. I'm
No.
done.
Yeah,
It was bleak. I'm glad I've seen it. I can say thank you. I'm done now.
All right, so thus concludes episode 1. Final thoughts?
No final thoughts. I've said everything I wanted to say about these 5 movies. How about you?
I have said everything I want to say as well, and I'm glad we both agreed on Butch. Let us know what you think. Tell us if we were correct, if you have very strong opinions either way. Let us know if we actually encourage you to watch a movie that you may not have seen before. We would like to hear that as well.
All
So
of these movies were easily found on streaming to either rent for a small amount, or some of them were streaming on services that most people have.
yeah, I only had to pay for one of them, which was Anne. That
Yeah.
was the only one I had to pay for.
Yeah.
All right, thank you all, and until next time.